An epidemiologist has told the faltering and now delayed UK COVID inquiry that many COVID measures were basically silly and nonsense. The Slovakian leader is demanding an investigation into excess deaths and adverse vaccine injuries. Does this mean that the establishment COVID narrative is finally about to snap, break, and come undone? Hello there, you Awakening Wonders. Thanks for joining us on our voyage to truth and freedom. In the COVID inquiry in the UK, which, as I've told you, is being delayed now, even though it's cost £145 million, they're putting it till after the election so we can vote for another centralist, globalist, conglomerate stooge. An epidemiologist has said that many of the measures taken during lockdown were ludicrous, unhelpful, nonsensical. What's good is this is an epidemiologist without an axe to grind. This isn't some fringe conspiracy theorist or a lunatic in a leather jacket. This is a scientist just going, well, that doesn't make sense. It was odd that they did that. And essentially, it's another piece of the puzzle falling into place. And just in case you're still clinging on to the idea, and I know you're not, but I'm sort of, I suppose, aggressively addressing the doubters out there, that somehow all of this was business as usual and there's nothing to see here, the Slovakian leader is demanding an inquiry and investigation into excess deaths, the way that the legacy media reported deaths during the pandemic, and adverse events as a result of vaccines. Essentially, what we're beginning to see now is the narratives that have been awake and alive in these spaces, even though the legacy media have tried to censor them in conjunction with the deep state, are entering into the kind of institutions that they previously regarded as legitimate. So now, this story, the story you've long known, is becoming unavoidable. This means there will be consequences for them, and I'm fascinated to see what they are. Astonishingly, the legacy media are still trying to amp up fear by claiming that COVID is the new HIV, just in case you were starting to not pay proper attention. First of all, let's look at this epidemiologist in a COVID inquiry and see how he just sort of casually dismisses and denounces measures that were normalised during that berserk period of clear revelation.
There was a lot of concern about how well people would tolerate lockdown, but that was an unknown.
That's Professor Mark Woolhouse. He's obviously already said that they were looking at as kind of a sociological idea rather than a scientific or epidemiological one. Will people tolerate lockdowns? And you remember, don't you, the conversations, do you think that Americans or British people will tolerate what was easily achieved in authoritarian China? We now know, extraordinarily, that people will tolerate it. That seems to be the sociological conclusion drawn from that period.
But I felt that discussion was more in the vein of, well, how long and severe a lockdown could we get away with?
Get away with. Didn't you sense that that was the kind of attitude? Curious that we can't see any of the WhatsApp text messages or communications between senior political figures like the current Prime Minister, the former one, because they've all somehow just magically deleted all their messages or factory reset. There's all sorts of reasons why a person's text messages could go missing.
But the public would tolerate rather than actually looking at evidence of components of it and saying we didn't need them.
Isn't it odd how it takes an epidemiologist in an inquiry, a retrospective inquiry, to say, it's not like they were, looking at evidence or anything, to make us all realise, like with a start, as if a cold glass of water has been flung in your face, oh my God, we can't trust them. Those of us that never trusted them, we were right. Wow, okay, right, let's immediately apply that mentality to what's happening now. Whoa!
Okay. Professor Woolhouse, sorry to interrupt. When you talk about outdoor activities,
you should be locked down. Cough, cough.
Are you meaning things like going for a walk in the park, or are you talking also about outdoor activities like football matches?
Football matches were on the cusp.
Well, because a lot of people are gathering, they're going there by public transport, they might go to a pub together.
Those fascists, those racists, those Nazis, those lunatics, they're on a train, and now they're in a pub, and now they're going to Nuremberg.
Yeah. All those different variables.
Yes. That would, I mean, you'd need to do a fairly detailed public health appraisal.
Boring, just like everyone in their house.
Detailed public health appraisal of where you drew the line.
Draw the line wherever we like. We'll draw the line from Klaus Schwab's pen all the way to the WHO treaty.
But we, in the UK, arrested people for going on solo walks in the mountains. That's just utterly absurd.
Look at that mountain view. Takes the breath away, doesn't it? Yeah, it just shows you how insignificant we are, those mountains. Is that someone going for a walk? Get!
That devalues the whole idea of social distancing when anyone can see. This is nonsense.
Social distancing, by the way, which Anthony Fauci admitted in his own inquiry, was arbitrarily arrived at. The 6-foot figure just sort of appeared. Remember what Mark Woolhouse is referring to, and he's obviously a person that's interested in freedom and more significantly science, is that a lot of goodwill was expended during that time. And also the important idea that we stayed in our houses or took certain medications under the auspices of the idea that we were helping other people and society as a whole. Do you see how that idea was mobilized? Well, we're all in this together. We've got to help one another. What about the vulnerable? Many of these questions did not withstand scrutiny. Hold on, it doesn't stop transmission. Hang about, the distances are arbitrary. Lockdowns aren't effective. Sooner or later, someone's going to look at what went on in various African nations to see how much difference these vaccines actually made. Because, of course, in Africa, it wasn't deemed necessary to have these vaccines because they couldn't afford them. Could that be another clue to the objective behind all this?
But it was done. May I?
See how different our country is from your... Oh, do you mind if I... It's another thing, I'm quite cheesed off about all of this. We've been lied to on an unconventional scale. If I may, forgive me. God bless the Queen.
Absolutely. Another good example, there was an absolute outcry in the summer of 2020 that people were going to beaches.
Beaches, mountains, Mother Nature, the earth itself. Disgusting, you fascists.
There was never, ever an outbreak of COVID-19 anywhere in the world linked to a beach.
We can't make this content without your love and support and without the support of our sponsors who we always select on the basis of effective products, like today's. Have you noticed that recently clusters of respiratory illnesses in northern China and what's been referred to as white lung syndrome in the United States are scattered across the headlines? There's hashtag white lung. They're drawing attention, I believe, to the importance of being prepared for medical emergencies. With close to 90% of pharmaceuticals in the US being produced outside of the country, what will happen when the inevitable next global crisis strikes? Countries will clamp down on exports. They'll stockpile. The price of drugs will rise, and the pharmacy shelves in America, they say, will empty. Is it already starting to happen? Well, the Wellness Company's medical emergency kit has got you covered for times like this. The Wellness Company is home to Dr. Peter McCulloch and Dr. Drew Pinsky. They've both been guests on our show. They're truth-telling doctors who are empowering you to take control of your health. 40% of Americans say they would avoid a doctor or hospital unless it was a catastrophic situation. The Wellness Company's medical emergency kit provides a solution. This handy little kit includes 8 potentially life-saving medications for you, along with a guidebook for safe use, emergency antibiotics, antivirals and antiparasitics to keep you and your family safe in the face of natural disasters, supply chain shortages or medical emergencies like white lung or COVID. Go to twc.health/brand and grab your medical emergency kit right now. That's twc.health/brand. Code brand saves you 10% at checkout. So if you use the code brand, you'll get 10% off. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control of your health with the Wellness Company's medical emergency kit. Thank you. Now, let's get into this.
It was fine. People could go to the beach. But nonetheless, we were very resistant.
Clearly a respectable scientist and professor interpreting many of the measures as erroneous, draconian, slapdash and ludicrous. And that's how many of us felt at the time. So that's one avenue. The social measures that were deployed were seemingly ridiculous. Now over in Slovakia, that bastion of democracy, that aspirant nation Slovakia, it seems that they are interested in truth and freedom. Here is the leader of Slovakia talking at length about his desire to investigate excess deaths, adverse events, and the reporting of deaths during the pandemic period. He seems pretty, to quote the epidemiologist, cheesed off.
Dámy a páni z progresívneho Slovenska z opozície, videli ste štatistiky, ako nám stúpli úmrtia na rôzne srdcovo-cievne príhody kvôli očkovaniu? Ale vy to odmietate. Samozrejme, že to odmietate, budete tvrdiť, že očkovanie bolo najlepšie na svete.
So he's talking about myocarditis and heart diseases rising since vaccination and demanding an investigation into that. Something that you'd have heard on independent media years ago. And we only know that stuff, of course, because of brave people like Jay Bhattacharya or Robert Malone or Peter McCulloch or all of the people that stuck their neck out in order to convey this information to us.
Čo viete o tom, koľko nám zostalo vakcín, ktoré expirovali, koľko peňazí sa vyhodilo do vzduchu?
Now he's referring to the extraordinary deals that took place between Pfizer and the European Union, some of them being arranged by a text message, quite undemocratic, and the possibility that some of these vaccines will go completely unused.
Čo viete o nákupoch zdravotníckej techniky a testov? Viete o tom, že sme preukázali veľmi jasne prepojenie trnavskej firmy na predsedu jednej z opozičných politických strán.
Now he's talking about curious relationships between members of political parties and pharmaceutical groups, suggesting that perhaps deals were achieved or brought about for motives other than public health.
100-tisícové, miliónové nákupy, úplne zbytočné. Čo viete o manažmente? Čo viete o tom, čo sa dialo pokiaľ išlo o prijímanie rôznych opatrení, ktoré podľa nášho názoru podstatne viac zvyšovali chorobnosť, ako to bolo možno v iných krajinách.
In fact, it's an indication of how well educated we've all become during this period that you'll have heard already of many of the points that he is making. Now talking about comorbidities, talking about measures taken in other states, variations in lockdown measures across the world, and now that we have available data to see how effective those measures were.
Viete, že som bol veľmi otvorený, ja som to povedal pani predsedničke Európskej komisie otvorene, že tie podozrenia, ktoré sú spojené s ňou a s nákupom, najväčším nákupom v histórii Európskej komisie vakcín, kedy si doslova do písmena vymieniala tajné SMS-ky s riaditeľom Pfizeru a kedy poslancom Európskeho parlamentu na posmech bola napísaná, vydaná správa, ktorá bola celá začiernená. Jednoducho nedozvieme sa nikdy pravdu.
Now, he's talking about that deal between the EU and Pfizer and how when a plea for transparency was made, it was largely redacted.
Akú úlohu farmaceutické firmy zohrali a kto vlastne organizoval...
Now, he's questioning the role that the pharmaceutical companies may have played even in constructing the legislation. And when you know that BlackRock were involved in the funding of COVID measures and that BlackRock were involved in the legislation that generated the response to the 2008 crash, you have to wonder what kind of large corporations are granted when it comes to designing legislation that could be advantageous and beneficial to their organizations. Certainly it's a line of inquiry that this dude wants to see undertaken.
Slovenská verejnosť jednoducho potrebuje odpoveď. Potrebuje odpoveď ohľadne očkovania. Čo to vlastne bolo? Prečo boli ľudia očkovaní rôznymi experimentálnymi vakcínami bez akýchkoľvek skúšok? Prečo do ľudí boli pchaté všelijaké lieky?
Now it's getting to the very heart of the matter. Hang on a minute, why were we all being injected with this stuff? Maybe we didn't know enough about it. Perhaps we can't trust these people. Perhaps we should have been a little more circumspect and a bit less bombastic around this stuff.
Prečo bolo celoplošné testovanie? Kto kupoval? Prečo kupoval? Aké množstva sa kupovali? Koľko to stálo peňazí? A skončíme pri miliardách.
Now, apparently some of the people in the Slovakian parliament are grinning and he's quite pissed off about that.
Za týchto podmienok sme sa rozhodli, že vytvoríme úrad splnomocnenca vlády, ktorý sa bude týmito otázkami zaoberať. Chceme vedieť ešte na základe toho, čo máme k dispozícii, čo sa vlastne udialo. Absolútne, opakujem ešte raz, absolútne presvedčený, že jeho práca bude viesť k výsledkom, ktoré budeme zverejňovať a budeme slovenskej verejnosti hovoriť, čo sa to vlastne pre Boha počas toho covidu stalo.
That's extraordinary. So ultimately it's going to lead to the publication of data asking the question, what the hell happened during this pandemic? So ultimately Slovakia, probably because they're not considered to be one of your main France, Britain, Germany style major European nations, are doing a proper inquiry because they're not under the thumb of pharmaceutical companies, I might suggest. And their inquiry might go a little further than the UK one and reach some conclusions that would be difficult to reach in nations like yours and ours, but that are nonetheless important conclusions to reach.
A zarobili podľa všetkého obrovské peniaze na zbytočnej kúpe rôznych zdravotníckych pomôcok a na vakcínach.
Just as the weight of evidence was about to overwhelm the establishment and their desire to cling on to control of the narrative, a new piece of propaganda has emerged. COVID is the new HIV. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
The reason the comparison to HIV...
Look at how they've strapped it for a start. COVID is similar to HIV. News for all America.
The comparison to HIV is important is because HIV was also asymptomatic.
See, it's asymptomatic. I'll tell you another similarity. Anthony Fauci worked pretty hard on that HIV virus as well.
I mean, you couldn't see the virus through symptoms because people were infected for 7, 8, 9 years before they developed symptoms. But HIV quietly destroyed our immune system.
Well, do you know what you should do? You should get that HIV virus, see if you can aerosolize it or make it worse in some way or turn it into a weapon. This is an opportunity that's too good to waste.
We're learning now about mitochondria and viral impact and brain fog.
These are all consequences of long COVID, by the way. What you think there's another way you could get those conditions? Ooh, conspiracy theorist.
The changes in our neurons and the cells that nourish our neurons that really allow us to think and move. And we're learning that because what of the long COVID has done. And so there's two sides of this coin every time.
There certainly is. And we know where that coin's going to end up. In Anthony Fauci's pocket.
That mild and moderate COVID can do. That is on scene, just like HIV was destroying our immune system.
Well, nice nodding there, guys, over at the Legacy Media. Great work, another great broadcast. So there you have it. An epidemiologist in a delayed UK inquiry saying that many of the measures were ridiculous. The Slovakian opinion leader telling us there's going to be a proper investigation, and the legacy media very keen to amplify the idea that we should all be terrified and therefore presumably spending money and complying. I don't know what conclusions you draw from HIV is the new COVID and COVID's the old HIV. So there you go, the legacy media still pretty keen to keep you compliant and frightened, even at a time when it's plain to me that what you should be is suspicious and awakened. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and chat. Remember, we give you one exclusive video every week if you become a supporter of our community. There's a link in the description telling you how to do just that. Stay free. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the chat. Stay free. If you're watching this on Locals as an Awakened Wonder, thank you so much for being a member of our community. Tell us what kind of content you want below, and we will do our level best to provide it for you. Love you. Stay free. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think. See you in a second.